Hi everyone, welcome to today's research-informed defensive lesson here at Active Self-Protection. I am your host, as always, John Correa.
And I'm your co-host, Neil Widener.
MagTech is the only freedom seed I use on the range. I personally have over 100,000 rounds downrange of MagTech, and it's unbelievably reliable, very accurate, and a great value. Pick some up for your next range trip wherever you shop for range supplies. This incident comes out of Spanaway, Washington, which is a little tiny town between Olympia and Tacoma. And there is a party of high school kids going on here. The mother of the host of the party is home and supervising. But the noise complaints started at 10:45 at night. Police were dispatched to that, but then were rerouted to a priority call, apparently for an armed robbery. And then when they got done with that, they started back towards the party, got rerouted again for a car wreck, and then came back after the third call came in about 45 minutes later that the teens were starting to fight in the street. Now, I want you to pay attention to the lower left corner because that is where our action is, where you have several guys here who are 17 years old and armed, one of whom, who is our aggressor, has multiple convictions for assault on his record already, as well as possession of a firearm in the commission of a crime. Let's listen into what happens. As it comes back around, let's watch it slow down a little bit where our perpetrator here is going to get mad at these guys and pull a gun, shoot the first guy who's on camera, shoot the second guy who's off camera. And then the first guy actually drew his firearm as well and shot at our perpetrator, hit him in the leg. Our perpetrator actually shot the first guy and the second guy fatally in this particular case. 4 other people were badly wounded as well in serious condition, according to the news stories that I've linked in the description. And our juvenile here has been charged as an adult with 2 counts of open murder. Neil gets to do an awful lot of reading of the comments here at Active Self-Protection. And we read all of the comments in the app, every single one. And those tend to be pretty good. Neil, on YouTube, maybe a little different.
It's not, people are not as nice on the YouTubes as they are in the app, but it's always fun. Well, it's not always fun. It's always interesting, let's say that. And I spend a good portion of my day communicating with people in the comments.
So, be nice, be kind, be professional, be a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent commenter, would you?
Please.
You know, Neil, I didn't go to a lot of parties in high school. I wasn't that cool, but I did go to a few in college. And, you know, thinking back and looking back on it, those places are just filled with stupid people doing stupid things at stupid times. And you might say, well, you know, my child is a good child and they would never get into any kind of trouble. And that might be true. But when you go to big parties like this, you invite the stupidity of everyone whose child would do stupid things.
And the thing that we see, John, is 17-year-olds don't make the greatest decisions. And I didn't when I was that age. You probably didn't either. I did go to a few of these kind of parties. Fortunately, we didn't have gunfights break out, but a lot of dumb stuff happens at these things. And you know, I think we're fortunate to survive them in a lot of cases. And this is a great example. We can learn a ton of lessons from this. But the big one is know who your kids are hanging out with.
Yeah, I really think know who your kids are hanging out with is just a great lesson here. And of course, the vast majority of these kinds of parties today don't end in gunfights, right? I don't want you to watch a video like this and think, oh, this happens every time that kids go to a party, because they don't. The vast majority of times they're fine. I am saying know who your kids hang out with, know what kind of folks that they bring around them. And when it starts to get to be the witching hour, here they are, you know, 11:30 at night, man, we start getting into stupid hours. We start breaking multiple rules of stupid, and I get it, that's when the parties happen. But teach your kids to be smart, you know, and those 5 rules of stupid. Don't go stupid places with stupid people at stupid times. and do stupid things for stupid reasons, they really matter. Now, our perpetrator draws a gun and shoots the first guy who is on camera here in the lower left. And I want to recognize the fact, Neil, that nothing is going to justify, if you're having a verbal disagreement with a bunch of people. Now, I suppose it's possible, potentially, that the guy said, yeah, we're going to kill you, and he believed him. But I don't see any furtive motion from our first defender here, and he just pulls a gun and shoots him. Now, our guy here who ends up dying, he gets his gun out in the fight too, and gets some shots towards the perpetrator, and even hits him with one. But action always beats reaction here, and as a defender, you're always going to be behind the initiative curve.
John, I think the thing that we've got to remember here is that, these lessons aren't going to be for 17-year-old kids. These lessons, we as self-defenders can take a lot from this. And that's a big one there, John. When somebody is ahead of you in the fight, their action is always going to beat you to the punch. And so if you think that you're going to outdraw somebody that's already got a gun out or has already started to draw, unless you are rocket fast, you're behind in this kind of thing, and you have to take appropriate actions to get yourself ahead in the fight and to protect yourself.
Yeah, of course, if you're 17 years old, the lesson here is eat your vegetables, stay in school, don't do drugs, and don't associate with hoodlums, okay? I mean, as a 17-year-old, that's your lessons here, right? Stay out of problems with these folks. Of course, as anybody who's an adult and a firearms carrier, of course, eat your vegetables, stay in school, don't do drugs, right? Be a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person. Don't get involved with hoodlums. Those kinds of things are also good and valuable lessons. But here, man, you're going to be behind. Now, he does get his gun out and in the fight here, and we're going to see him get his gun out and in the fight. And I want to note here that our guy does get his gun. He's mortally wounded, but he still gets his gun out. He doesn't know he's mortally wounded. From the perspective purely of tactics here, our perpetrator put one shot in the first guy and then transitioned to the second guy. And when we talk about the boarding house rules, remember, everybody gets firsts before anybody gets seconds. This is why we're very careful as a defender to say that it's servings, not shots, because you put a shot in somebody, even a shot that could eventually prove to be fatal, if it doesn't change his behavior, it doesn't do what you need it to do. Of course, we're talking about good people stopping deadly threats here, Neil. But we get an example of that here from the work of a perpetrator. Yeah,
it's an interesting example, and I think it's going to take a little bit for some folks to actually wrap their brain around the lesson. And the lesson isn't, for these specific kids. The lesson is for us, and we get to see here what happens in an actual gunfight, in that when you just give one to each person, the person you just gave one to is going to be able to give a few back in most cases. And and that's a real important piece to the self-defense puzzle, is that you've got to give them 2, 3, in some cases 4 shots to actually stop a threat. Now, this wasn't a threat, and I totally get that. And the comments are going to be all about the kids this and the kids that. But at the end of the day, if we can look past that and learn the lessons, there's some really good stuff here for us.
Yeah, and that especially applies to handguns here. Rifles are kind of a different world, right? And shotguns are kind of a different world. But handguns here, not often. Even though we do see people shoot once with a handgun and that changed people's behavior. So again, shoot until the threatening behavior stops. That's what we're looking for. Not just, I put a shot in him. What did it do to his behavior? And often that'll take more than one. Not always, but often it will. So I think that's a pretty good lesson here. And our guy here, who is a defender, he gets some shots going this guy's way, but I want to note the fact that he's kind of panic and blind firing here. He did end up hitting this guy in the leg. That did, in some sense, change his behavior, but it didn't stop the threat, because you notice here he's just turning away and kind of blind firing, panic firing. And looking at all the innocents around, Neil, I understand why you might do that, because you're trying to get away. You're already hit. You're feeling the effects of that. You are responsible for every round that heads down range, though. And so, watching where your bullets are going and not panic firing is an important part of being a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person.
It really is. And the thing that I, it's hard to go back and question these kind of things sometimes. And I get that, we're Monday morning quarterbacking. That's what the best quarterbacks do, is they watch film to get better. And what I would have liked to have seen our defender here do is get both hands on the gun. And instead of backing up directly in line with where those shots were coming from, maybe step to the side and get both hands on the gun and try to end that threat. However, However, what he's dealing with is the fibs factor because he's been shot. So he is dealing with, oh no, I've been shot. I've got to get out of here. And again, at 17, I don't think their brain is developed enough to really consider all of the decisions that they're making. And of course, they paid the ultimate price for this. But potentially, he may have survived this had he taken a hard step to the right and got out of the line of fire and put both hands on the gun and finished the threat a little bit quicker.
Yep, surely he could have. Now, of course, as everybody starts scattering here, good reminder from us, this is one of the reasons I keep a trauma first aid kit on my person, because again, once the immediate threat goes away, now we got to start triaging injuries. There are not only 2 people here who took mortal wounds, there are 4 people here who took grievous wounds. And could some immediate trauma care have helped either of the people who were mortally wounded? I don't know. But maybe, and having some trauma first aid equipment and the training to use it can definitely help. Of course, you get one of the kits from Mountain Man Medical. All the proceeds that would come to ASP go to the charities, and we've given thousands and thousands of dollars over the last years to good charities. So go pick one up there or roll your own. I don't care. It doesn't hurt my feelings any. Make sure that you have it and make sure that you're trained to use it. Of course, practicing spiritual fitness every single day. Make sure that you've been a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person. You made a difference in your world, that your family knows that you love them. You've handled every conflict that you can, and you and Jesus have a strong relationship, because you'll need it on that day and you may not have time to get it. Obviously, this is a little bit of an interesting one because the tactics and the techniques and the procedures we're learning from a bad example here, but I think they're still valid and they can still help us. And of course, the big lessons here: eat your vegetables, stay in school, don't do drugs. That's part of covering your ASP.